As some of you are asking me to make a video on the books of Dead Space, I thought that talking about them would be an interesting idea, and would help a certain timeline video in the future to convey what happens in these eras. So in this video I will be giving you an overview of the events in the books that are instrumental to the whole picture of Dead Space. In Dead Space Martyr, the book tells the story of the black marker found on Earth in the Gulf of Mexico 294 years prior to the events of the first installment of Dead Space in Aegis 7, and it depicts the origins of the fanatical religion known as unitology. The book starts out with a man being attacked by a large creature in a circular room. The man fares well against a nightmarish monster, however, despite his efforts, he gets ripped in half by it. The story shifts to its first chapter with the first sighting of a necromorph on the beach, emitting a toxic gas that appears to be a wheezer. With every passing moment, the necromorph would expand its mass, becoming bigger and bigger, until the inhabitants of Chicxulub decided on burning the monster, leaving only its charred skeleton as its remains. The man walks the child that first saw the creature on the beach back to her home, only for him to lose his way from hearing whispers and seeing things. He would eventually come back to reality to find that the girl was missing from his side. He would search for her at her house, thinking that she must have walked to her house alone, only to find symbols all over the walls written in blood, and he soon finds the girl with a slit throat. The plot then shifts to Michael Altman, a geophysicist, who has been investigating into some gravitational anomalies after receiving a call to meet him at a bar regarding the calls he had been sending out about his request for help with his investigation. Altman thought it might have been a prank caller, however he decides on meeting the man after talking about his day with his girlfriend. The man would turn out to be Charles Hammond, a freelance worker for Dredger Corp, which he remarks as a shady resource retrieval corporation, hinting at his disdain for the company. He explains that Dredger Corp are also investigating into the disturbances as well, and talks on a pulse signal emanating from that location. Altman would leave the bar later on, however while walking the streets in the surrounding area, Hammond would get a strong headache while hearing whispers. Three men would approach him from the shadows that wanted to take him in for questioning. Due to the whispers, along with his descent into madness, he would pull out a pocket knife and cut his throat out, which stunned the three men. Dredger Corp would send a sub down to the site of the abnormal gravity in the Gulf of Mexico. After mining through the rock to get to the source of the activity, one of the pilots would start to feel the effects of the marker's influence, hallucinating his deceased brother, Shane, who warns him to stay clear of the marker. When the other pilot would cut a piece off of the marker with the sub's equipment, the hallucination would explode in a burst of blood, which would lead the pilot into attacking the other, killing him. He would then write marker symbols all over the interior of the sub with the other pilot's blood. In his newly found level of insanity, he would start to paint the symbols all over his body, with his brother returning to warn him again of the black marker, which influences him into creating a vidlog and proceeds to broadcast it to the surrounding area above them. The crew member then snaps out of it and then realizes that the marker was manipulating him. Unfortunately, the damage was already done, and he would die of oxygen starvation. Altman would recover the distorted video log and put the pieces back together, allowing for the full video to be played to the public, to expose Dredger Corp. Feeling the heat, they decided to hold a press conference to try and assume some damage control for their assets. However, it gets to the point where they feel like they can no longer control the situation, so they call in the military forces to salvage the operation. Tanner would resign from his position in the company, but then hallucinates that he was with a suffocating Dantic, who is slowly dying, in which case he decides to pull out his pocket knife to share some oxygen with him. However, Back in reality, it was a different story. Instead of cutting an oxygen pipe, he was in fact slicing his own throat out. Markov would inform the president of Dredgercorp about this, and also says that an ocean research facility is under construction to further conduct their operations. Altman would draw in the attention of Dredgercorp and the military personnel by requesting the American Sector Science Foundation conducts their own investigation for scientific analysis. They would track him down and question him, only to find out that he knows a little too much for their liking. However, they then employed him to join their team instead of silencing him. It turns out that a massive research team has been assembled with just about a scientist from every corner of the planet. Altman would eventually meet and befriend a submarine pilot who would be assigned to go down to the sub and retrieve it. By request of the pilot, Altman would be allowed by Markov to go down to the sub with him instead of the unfit and drunken pilot. While down there, Altman would find pinkish matter clinging to the exterior of the other sub. He would take a sample along with seeing necromorph fish that would be tearing the aquatic life to pieces. They would then retrieve a piece of the marker found nearby. Once back inside the research facility, he would hand the sample over to the scientists for them to study, while he would begin to study the marker fragment in private. After many hours of looking into the marker, he comes to the conclusion that the marker must have some sort of mind control properties, or something else is at play here. To his own amazement, he is unaffected by the effects coming from the black marker, which pushes him to return to the site to retrieve the rest of the marker, which Markov allows out of curiosity. While in the depths of the Gulf, Altman would be forced to kill one of the crew members in self-defense, as he was going to open the hatch to let his ghostly father inside. However, the mission was a success, and the marker was brought by Michael to the facility for better or for worse. A religious cult or movement had been developing around the marker soon afterwards, which would lead some to merely worship the obelisk and others to delve into madness, lashing out, committing suicide on a rapid level. Altman would become skeptical and fearful of the movement. He would become even more uncomfortable with them when they would announce that he is the prophet as he has seen it. Tensions would arise not just between the early unitologists and the military, but with Altman and his colleagues. Altman would abuse his influence of the believers to create a video log. After this, he would be sent to Washington, D.C., basically thrown away like an old tool. However, Altman would hold a press conference to show what they had found, resulting in an enraged Markov to send his team after him. Sometime later, Altman and his girlfriend would be found by the team and taken back to the facility. Once there, he is separated from Ada and then interrogated with torture by Cracks. While this is going on, the believers are getting more and more agitated by the military and was heading to the boiling point. Stevens interrupts Cracks, asking him to allow Altman to calm the mob down. It is later revealed to us that Stevens is actually a believer himself and is sympathetic to Altman. However, he uses this time to take the marker shard to the marker and make it whole once again. The researchers begin to theorize that the marker's purpose is to bring about eternal life. One of the scientists, Grote, decides to inject himself with a genetically unique fluid, which he believed to be a sedative to calm him from the hallucinations of his grandmother. However, in his confusion, he injected himself with a DNA sample that was encoded from the symbols carved into the skin of the marker. The apparition commands him to go to the marker and go into the dead space field, or as we know as the dormancy field, where it is detailed that the field is to prevent convergence going further and dooming humanity. This is where Cracks and his soldiers arrive to shoot Grote in the head, who is then taken away from the marker on a stretcher bed. While taking Grote's body to the lower levels, his DNA is beginning to change due to the recombinant cells flowing through his bloodstream, which will later on transform him into an infector to kickstart the outbreak. 3 scientists witness the infector leap out of the bed. A little bit later, it attacks and transforms patients into slashers. One of the scientists, known as Hideki Ishimura, escapes, leaving the others at the mercy of the necromorphs. The lower levels soon become fully infested by necromorphs. Most of the personnel are either dead or transformed. However, another scientist, Harmon, manages to get to the marker, who would be protected by the dormancy field. Altman and fellow survivors escape by using refurbished plasma cutters. Cracks, Markov, and a few of his men also escape the nightmarish creatures. Altman would find his way ashore. Altman believes Markov and Krax to have perished in the facility. However, back at the mainland facility, Altman is confronted by Markov's corrupt and ignorant lackeys, which forces him to cut off the arm of one of the men using the plasma cutter. When he would be contacted by the marker using his girlfriend as a apparition, knowing that the marker only uses the dead for its many illusions, he comes to the realization that Ada is in fact dead. With nothing left to live for, he takes a plasma saw and begins his journey back to the Terror within the ocean facility in an effort to understand what the marker wants, or to find a way to contain the nightmare. He would reach the facility, which is completely dark except for the emergency lights that have been activated due to the loss of power. Altman would find a way to contact Harmon and swim through the submarine bay doors in order to avoid the massive cluster of necromorphs patrolling through the corridors. He would encounter a brute and spider-like necromorphs that are described to have the same appearance as the divider parts. He would come across a massive necromorph that is growing in size, which sounds like a proto-hive mind. The book claims it to be invincible as well. Harmon would meet up with him and follow Altman through the dark corridors while he kept on saying, "Altman be praised," giving us the origin for the famous quote, much to Michael's distaste. Altman would soon come to the conclusion that sending the marker back to the bottom of the ocean could end the outbreak, so he finds a way to do it by sinking the facility, much to Harmon's distress about the idea, but would go along with it when Altman lies to him, saying that the marker told him to do it, that it needed to rest at the bottom of the Gulf. They would successfully drown out the outbreak and infestation as the necromorphs were redesigned to operate on land rather than water. However, the likelihood of the marker falling back to the exact spot it was found is low, and is possibly the reason how the moons found Earth in Dead Space 3 awakened so quickly. Altman and Harmon would escape on a boat. However, Harmon quickly assaults Altman with the anchor of the boat, knocking him out cold. Altman would reawaken under Markov, who would announce that he is a believer himself. Krax killed his girlfriend, and that Krax was transformed into a necromorph, and that Altman must fight him for survival using nothing but a spoon while he cracks a bottle of champagne. He tells Michael that he plans on creating a religion in his own name called unitology, using Altman as a martyr which will push humanity to the next stage of evolution. This is where the opening of the book comes in with Michael Altman's humiliating death. And that is the summary of Dead Space Martyr, showing us the truth of unitology's so-called saint, martyr, and founder of the religious cult, being birthed by Markov and his fellow partners for their own corrupt intentions. So, let's move on to the next book in the series, Dead Space Catalyst. Set after Dead Space Martyr in 2294, extinction begins to threaten mankind. EarthGov starts to tamper with the research on the Black Marker in an attempt to save humanity from the lack of resources. Steeped in desperation, deceit, and hubris, the story in the books continues. Two brothers, Istvan and Jency, would grow up together under the porous dome on Binduga. Jency had always looked after Istvan, however, would occasionally lash out while being violently paranoid. Istvan, on the other hand, had always been freakish, a little off, obsessed with numbers and patterns, prone to sudden episodes of rage and paranoia. His mannerisms were strange, and his thinking was even stranger. When the two would return home after picking up food supplies, they would notice something was wrong. After further investigation, they would see their mother, the woman who supported them, was on the ground, suffering from a seizure. Jency would run over to her and attempt to revive her. Istvan saw something different. He saw the Shadow Man strangling his mother. He would begin to fall into a trance with the packages that Jency had dropped, with each one revealing a secret to him. Jency would shout at his brother, telling him to call the emergency services. A short time afterwards, their mother was revived, but sent to a mental institution. The two brothers would be sent into foster care. Jency would theorize that they would most likely be separated, much to Istvan's disdain, asking his brother to join him so that they can continue their lives together while he packs his belongings. Jency, torn between family and reality, abandons his brother and joins a new family, leaving his brother alone in the slums.
Jency started a new life with a middle-class family living out of the slums. He had entered the educational system and would become a successful student. He would become good friends with another student called Henry Wandry, who would be his first true friend while he was free from the constraints of his brother. While Jency was becoming an academic success, Istvan had become a drifter throughout the domes, scavenging the essentials to survive his day-to-day life, all the while listening to the Shadow Man within his own mind. Istvan would intrude on his old apartment, where he would live there and await for those who were coming for him. Jency and Henry would grow closer together, so much so that he takes Henry to his old apartment in the Marina Valley compound. Once they arrive in the wrecked apartment, he soon asks Henry to leave as the place was bringing back difficult memories. Henry would not take this all too seriously and would play it out as a game, sensing adventure around every corner when he would come across to the bedroom door. When an arm grabs him and pulls him inside, Jency could hear his muffled screams and would run to him. Jency ran into the bedroom to find Istvan on top of Henry, beating him to death. Jency would attempt to help Henry when he would be attacked. Istvan was unable to perceive that he was choking his own brother due to his overwhelming insanity. After Jency wraps his arms around his brother in an attempt to comfort him, Istvan snaps out of his frenzy and smiles at his brother. Once calmed down, Jency would clean him up and feed him, and while Henry and Jency would leave the old apartment, they both agreed that they would return to the apartment to help Istvan out with food and other supplies. Once home, after walking Henry back to his house, he would find Istvan raiding his fridge. Jency would warn him to leave the house, with Jency's foster mother threatening to call the police, which leads his brother to see Jency as his enemy. Istvan would run out of the house, and Jency would not see him for the next 4 years. 4 years later, Jency attends a college within Vinduga, studying computer programming skills, hacking and piloting skills, which is something he learns to have a passion for. Henry, with his rich family ties, would go into a university on Earth, but would flunk out and join Jency in the college he attended. Jency had his own apartment now, and a job working on huge cargo ships as a picker, in which he would transfer goods from the ship to the surface of the planet. One day, Jency would return home, where he would unexpectedly find his brother waiting for him, which startles him. Istvan would explain that he would soon be all over the news vidlogs, and he will be famous, then starts to giggle to himself, then gets up and walks out of the apartment casually. Jency, worried about his brother, contacts Henry, where he says that there are 4 major events happening soon: a school being opened by a colonial authority, a press conference by politician Tim Fisher, a political rally by David Vinaglia, and the arrival of an EarthGov ambassador, Jedro Berry. The two agree to figure out what Istvan's plan is and to put an end to it by predicting which 2 are the most likely targets and being there to stop him. Jency would arrive in the city square when Jedro Berry would arrive. However, Jency does not see his brother anywhere. At this time, Tim Fisher is giving a press conference about the structural integrity of the domes when Istvan makes his move. Seeing Istvan, Jency tries to intervene when his brother shoots the councilman in the head and is subdued by the armed forces of the sovereign colonies. When they confront him, he appears to be in shock as he apparently did not mean to kill him. With nothing else to do, Jency would return home in shock, trying to figure out why his brother would assassinate the councilman or what had pushed him to do it. Jency would eventually give up trying to make sense of it, and would attempt to find his demented brother at every police station or holding cell. To no such luck. It was as if his brother had just vanished. He would go through every level of power within the justice system until meeting with a general who assures him that his brother is alive and is in custody. However, he would not say any more. Jency would not worry about his brother's fate, but in the coming days, he would slowly forget about the incident and continue on with his life. Or so it seemed. After being subdued, Istvan would be transported to an unknown location where he would be greeted by a small grey-haired man. The men would ask him why he killed the councilman, only receiving that the voice in his head told him to do it. They would ignore him after this exchange, leaving him to the voice once again, causing Istvan to go ballistic and attack the guards. After this, he would be transported to another room, where the men would start using brutal methods to get what they want from him. However, Istvan would remain silent. Out of frustration, the grey-haired man would banish him to a planet far away from human laws and rights. Once there, the men would start to employ terrifying methods to get the information out of him, where he would struggle to maintain the strength needed to keep silent. Back on Vindigar, Janice receives a call while remembering the guilt he feels for his mother's fate, where he tells Henry what has happened. After a lengthy conversation about his brother's doing and fate, Henry would close the vidlog, but not before whispering, "Asperia." That's when Janice would vow to find and save his brother, wherever he may be, before it is too late. After days of pain and anguish, the grey-haired man angrily gives up on Istvan and sends him to his cell on the penal colony of Asperia. During his first lunch in months, he would meet the political prisoners Waldron, Bill, and Michael at the lunch table in a large mess hall, where they would welcome him to the worst place in the galaxy and talk about the prison. When Istvan receives a headache along with a noise that seemed to drone out everything else, he would then see shadows darting back and forth all around him, when they would slowly fade out and disappear, and the room returns to normal. Using his skills to get into a classified military intelligence, Genty confirms his suspicions on Asperia, finding out about a larger project happening, codenamed Project Asperia. Genty would calculate a way of getting to Asperia via a supply ship called Ebon. He would just have to replace one of the managers. He would break into one of the specialist apartments called Talbot. In an attempt to knock him out, Genty accidentally kills him instead, much to his shock. However, he would follow up with his plan to free his brother. He would soon be successful in getting aboard the vessel, leaving for Asperia, getting one step closer to Istvan. Back on Asperia, Istvan notices that the other prisoners are experiencing the headaches and growing fear for unknown reasons. Unknown to them, a red marker was inside the colony and would be reeling from its growing influence on their minds. One day, a man called Brian becomes insane and begins stabbing himself with a fork repeatedly until he eventually bleeds out and dies. Henry would walk in after the other prisoners had been returned to their cells and orders the body to be placed in cryogenic storage. Dr. Enoch Bridden, a devout unitologist, escorts Istvan to see the marker, and they both become entranced by its red glow. After walking towards the marker, Istvan would begin hallucinating people, screaming, and would shortly collapse to the ground. Genty and the crew would begin shocking out to Asperia. The captain would try to hail the military blockade to land on the planet. However, a warning plays out to them that Asperia is under strict quarantine, and all ships must not enter. When Janice spots a Scav gunship laying out mines all around Asperia, which entered their flight path. Seeing this, the pilots begin taking evasive action to dodge the mines. Genty would manage to find a standard astronaut rig just before the first mine were to detonate into the ship's hull. As expected, the hull would breach, sucking the men into space. However, using the zero-grav boots, Janice navigates his way to an escape pod and launches it towards the surface of the planet. Under the intoxicating influence of the red marker, Bridden becomes a full-blown zealot of unitology and claims the marker to be divine and Istvan to be a chosen prophet. Another pulse comes from the marker, however this one is to be much stronger than before, where everyone near or on Asperia begins to reel from the effects. Within the interrogation room that had been turned into a makeshift morgue, an infector appears from one of the beds and begins transforming the corpses into slasher necromorphs. Henry begins to see on the security cams a pale green moss expanding and starts spreading slowly through the corridors, which is a possible variant of the recombinant corruption. When he hears creaking of floorboards followed by screaming with each prisoner falling to the infestation and transformation, Henry opens the doors for the riot teams to fight the monstrosities, only for them to be cut down in rapid succession. Henry would soon lock himself inside of a booth to protect himself from the monsters who stalked the colony's citizens. The outbreak was within full swing and spreading rapidly, with people attempting to fight back against the unknown infection, only to fail, becoming one with them and restarting the cycle. At this time, Genty loses control of the lifepod as it broke through the atmosphere of Asperia. Spiraling out of control, his pod would crash into the penal colony inside of a large chamber. He would get out and walk towards the door when he is attacked by an infector, furiously trying to kill and assimilate Jency. However, he shot the infector with his flare pistol, incinerating it. A voice would then appear from the audio comms, informing Janice of the situation present within the colony. The voice would give him direction to meet up with him. Janice would run through to the mess hall, which would prove to be a mistake as a horde of necromorphs were inside, who would give chase to the man. Janice would try to contact the voice again, only for no answers other than the regurgitated sounds from the necromorphs. Regardless of this, Janice would tell the mysterious voice to close the escape door at the right time, before the monsters could reach him. As Janice runs and leaps into the doorway, the door slams shut, slicing a necromorph in two. After this, Jency would find the makeshift morgue and former interrogation room, where he finds an early prototype of the plasma saw, known as the laser saw. He would find a survivor who introduces himself as James Waldron, where the two would agree to work together as they make their way to the prison colony control room. However, soon after this, James hallucinates Jency as his father. James would then begin beating Jency intensely with a dead guard's helmet. Jency, in his struggle, reaches for his pistol and shoots a flare into his stomach, which engulfs Waldron in flames and slowly burns to death. Jency would then begin to put the body to rest when an infector arrives and reanimates the body into a slasher. Janice defeats the necromorphs and then moves on to the control room to find the man behind the voice, Henry, who faints at the sight of Jency. Jency looks through the control room to find out that his brother may be still alive a few miles away at a research facility. Henry and Jency unite once again to get to the facility, when a pre-recorded message informs them to return or to be destroyed. Already dead set on their path, they continue inside an ATV to traverse the surface when a mine strikes the vehicle, throwing both of them into the air, which rocks them to their core. Henry is knocked unconscious, and the situation is about to get worse. They don't have enough air to get to the facility in time. Regardless, Jency grabs Henry and books it for the facility. Jency finds an airlock, however he begins to hallucinate from the lack of air. He sees his mother, who encourages his death. Regardless, he attempts to close the airlock so that new air will flow in. When the doors fail to close, he slowly passes out, only to wake up again to see that the airlock has sealed shut and Henry is awake. They begin banging on the door to await someone to let them in from the other side. After hours of waiting, two scientists open the door, armed with plasma rifles. When Jency tells them that they are looking for his brother, Anna, one of the scientists, gets angry and nearly blasts him to Kingdom Come when Dexter stops her and calms her down. They explain that Istvan is the reason for the chaos spreading through the facility. They would soon join forces. However, on their way to the marker chamber, Anna would step on a mine. Everyone takes her advice to get back, as she attempts to get clear of the blast zone by jumping off of the mine, which, as expected, blows her legs off and kills her due to the blood loss. Jency would begin to dismember the corpse, so she cannot come back as a necromorph. When Britton contacts them, warning them to back off, however they decide to continue until becoming trapped in a stasis field. Dexter manages to escape the stasis, and a crazed scientist attempts to kill the two, but is shot by Dexter instead, who frees Jency and Henry from their predicament. Britton soon learns that Jency is Istvan's brother, but claims otherwise, as he believes that Istvan is the prophet who will lead mankind into a new existence. The group enters another room, and Jency works on hacking a door pad when the lights go out, and a large necromorph drops out of a vent that is described as tall and thin, which sounds like a divider, who throws Henry against a wall and snaps his neck. Jency attacks the necromorph, shooting it in the head, which reduces it to a body swinging its arms trying to find them. He eventually opens the door and looks back on Henry's lifeless body. He would shut the door and sadly move towards the marker chamber. The two enter the marker chamber to find Istvan standing before the marker. Dexter, about to take aim and claim her prize, gets tackled by Jency, who attempts to stop her from assassinating his brother. Jency manages to overpower her in their struggle and grabs the gun and knocks her out. Jency would then use the butt of the gun in an attempt to knock some sense back into Istvan, who would then lash out and attack him. He would knock out Jency, and Britton would praise him for this. However, free from the delusions of the marker, he would attack Britton within his own insanity, snapping his neck. Jency would come to, and would begin listening to the delusions of his brother, saying stuff like, he can communicate with the marker, he can control it, he can build a new world for them. However, Jency tells him to close his eyes and wait for a surprise when he picks up the rifle and shoots him through the chest, with Istvan falling on top of Jency. After watching his brother slowly pass away, Jency would leave his side and lean against the doorframe, only to see a huge horde of necromorphs waiting for him. However, they cannot enter, rather surrounding the dead space field which is keeping Jency and Dexter safe. Jency would succumb to his eternal bleeding and collapses. In his last moments, he attempts to aim at the necromorphs when he finds the barrel of the rifle has made its way into his mouth. He attempts to aim at them again, issuing the same result. He would eventually give in and pull the trigger, which he believes will erase all of the marker's presence within his mind. And that's the summary of the Dead Space Catalyst, showing us the story of the Asperia testing facility. Apologies when I had told you about EarthGov's presence in Asperia, which was actually incorrect and I was wrong, and I apologize for misleading you with that bad information. However, I hope that this has set the record straight for you. Asperia is one of the marker testing facilities alongside Aegis 7, and this story tells us what actually happens within those events, and how they contribute to the events that lead into Dead Space 3's prologue within Tau Volantis. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video or agreed with the summary, then hit the video up with a like rating. Comment your thoughts below and I look forward to hearing from you. Become a champion of the Alliance today for exclusive rewards and recognition in the videos. Thank you to all of my channel members for your extra support. I really do appreciate the extra mile you go for me. And if you want more from this channel, then subscribe to be part of the British Alliance today and ring in that notification bell to be notified of all updates, new content, whether that be streams, posts or new videos along the way, and I will see all of you awesome people on the front lines, and have a good one.